Hi, welcome to this episode of The Daily. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I watched a really cool little documentary on Netflix that I'm going to recommend to you today. It's called The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. And if you were around in the 80s, like I was as a kid growing up, you will remember the professional wrestling era, and the greatest of the professional wrestlers of that era, the sort of the biggest showman and the most impressive athlete, if you like, in that arena, was this guy, Jake the Snake Roberts. And what's interesting is, since leaving wrestling, effectively his life had fallen off the wagon big time. He had got into some very serious drug and alcohol addiction. He was living away from his family. He'd made a real mess of things. And this documentary begins with him at that stage where a couple of friends of his or particularly one particular ex-wrestler friend of his, decides that he's actually going to try and help Jake the Snake to rediscover the fullness and flourishing of living a full and authentic life. And so he shows this extreme care and concern and goes out of his way and brings him into his home, and it begins this really quite beautiful journey. Now, I saw the initial description of the documentary and I thought, it's probably going to be sort of more like reality TV. It's going to be sort of so-so. I didn't expect much from it. Professional wrestling is, it's hardly highbrow stuff. It's a bit of fun, mindless entertainment. So I thought a documentary about this is probably not going to be much better. But in actual fact, it's a really beautiful, very powerful and very moving documentary. It tells a very important tale about masculinity. It has a very important portrait of how men can and should be helping each other, about men going out of their way to care for other men who have got themselves into real trouble, and that real tough love that only men can bring to the table when they are working with each other. There's some really beautiful and important things that it has to say about fatherhood and the importance of fatherhood, particularly fathers in the lives of boys. It's really quite important, and this documentary really highlights, because basically Jake the Snake, the reason he has fallen off the wagon and finds himself this destitute, lonely man living away from his family in drug and alcohol addiction, and he recounts this story in the documentary, is because when he was a young man, his father told him he was useless and that he would never amount to anything. And that put him on this journey of trying so desperately to prove his father wrong. And he went into all these extremes and got into even when he was involved in the wrestling, he just was always into the extremes and the excess, because he was trying to prove desperately to his father because of this deep wound. In this documentary, when he recounts the story, this grown man in his 60s, this big, strong guy who's now in his 60s, who recounts the story, and he's broken down, he's in absolute tears, telling about this moment where his father, as a young man, told him he was useless and would never amount to anything. So it's a beautiful and profoundly important reminder to all the dads out there about the fact that we need to really care for our sons, and that we need to have a genuine love and compassion and commitment to their well-being, not just to driving them and to getting behind them as only men can do, but to actually ensuring that we consistently give of ourselves in our driving. We're not just pushing them towards a project, but we are actually helping them to discover flourishing through the love that we show to them. So there you have it, The Resurrection of Jake the Snake, a really, really good little documentary. And guess what? I think even a lot of the women out there might find this documentary quite moving. You might look at this, ladies, and go, "Oh, wrestling, well, no thanks." But and to be fair, I was kind of a little bit like that myself. But watching the documentary, it's actually quite an emotive and powerfully moving tale of care and love and human kindness. Can't recommend it highly enough. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily.